Threads of Fortune follows the intersecting lives of Geneva Harold Bradshaw and Yao Obeng Antwi as they navigate a high-stakes business partnership that quickly evolves into a dangerous rescue mission and love. Geneva learned to measure a room the way some women measured a dress, by where the seams would pull, where the fabric might tear. The Bradshaw townhouse was all glass and marble and curated calm, but she could feel the pressure points. The tight set of Blake's jaw when he thought she'd spoken too long, the pause before he answered when he wanted her to hear the punishment in the silence. She stood at the kitchen island, fingers wrapped around a mug she didn't remember pouring, and stared past the skyline. Buckhead glittered in the distance like it didn't know what happened behind closed doors. Her cheekbone ached in a slow, blooming way beneath a careful sweep of concealer. An old trick, learned too quickly, perfected too well. By 8, she would be downtown, smiling through a campaign review like her life wasn't being edited line by line at home. Marketing was storytelling with budgets and deadlines, and Geneva was good at it, good enough that the Bradshaw name liked to borrow her shine. Blake called it supporting the family. He never called it her career. When Blake walked in, the air changed the way it always did, like the room straightened its spine. 6 feet of tailored confidence, cufflinks catching the light, cologne that carried amber and wood. A man built to be believed. The first time he'd spoken to her, 3 months after her father's funeral, he'd been gentleness in human form. "Are you all right?" Smooth voice, sincere eyes. And when she couldn't answer, but only nod in the affirmative, he gave her a tender smile and said, "I don't believe you." Back then she'd been a raw nerve named Geneva Harrell, only child, newly fatherless, watching strangers offer condolences like business cards. James Harrell had died suddenly of a heart attack, leaving behind a house too quiet, and a daughter who kept replaying their last conversation until the words lost meaning. Blake had appeared in a parking lot on one of those days, when grief felt public, humiliating. He'd offered coffee, corrected himself, "No, you need a drink," and talked her into laughter as if he'd invented it. 13 months later he'd proposed over a perfect dinner with her mother and his parents, Gregory and Catherine Bradshaw, beaming like they were welcoming a prize into their family corporation. The wedding had been 200 guests under open sky. Eleanor cried through the vows, and Geneva cried because she thought she'd made it to the other side of sorrow. 3 weeks after the honeymoon glow faded, an argument, about nothing she could name later, ended with Blake's hand across her face and a sentence that rewired her nervous system. "You do not walk out on me." Flowers came after. A heart-shaped locket, apologies wrapped in luxury. And then the next time, and the next, until she stopped being surprised and started being careful. Her mother had noticed. Of course she had. Eleanor Harrell, English professor at Clark Atlanta University, a woman who could dissect a sentence until it confessed, watched her daughter's smiles grow thin, and her visits grow rare. When Eleanor asked, Geneva always said she was tired, or busy, or fine. Words, carefully chosen, like furniture placed to block a door. "You're leaving early?" Blake's tone was light, conversational, a trap disguised as silk. Geneva kept her face neutral. "A client pitch, Midtown." Blake poured espresso like he was performing for an audience. "Client pitch for who?" she swallowed. "Global Fiber Solutions. They're opening a US arm here." That got his attention. Just a flicker. "Textiles," he said, as if tasting the word. "Foreign money, new to town. They'll need real estate sooner or later. I'll have my team reach out." Heat crawled up Geneva's neck. Everything became his by declaration. Her schedule, her contacts, her wins. She forced herself to breathe through it. In the bedroom, she fastened the heart-shaped locket at her throat, because it was easier than explaining why she didn't wear it. Her phone buzzed. "Mom." Geneva hesitated, thumb hovering, then answered softly, "Hey." "Baby," Eleanor said, her voice warm and sharp at the same time. "I just want to check on you. You looked like something was wrong during your last visit. Are you okay?" Geneva looked at the door, listened for Blake's footsteps, and lied with the skill of a woman trying to survive. "I'm fine, Mama." When she ended the call, she didn't know that by noon she would meet a man who didn't do small talk, didn't offer easy comfort, and might be the first person in years to look at her and see the truth. Atlanta moved fast, but it didn't move like a cra. From the top floor of his midtown high-rise, Yao Obeng Enki watched traffic stitch itself into ribbons of red and white. He liked systems, roads, markets, supply chains, people when they did what they said they would do. He disliked surprises. He disliked wasted time even more. 12 years ago, he'd started Global Fiber Solutions with a $25,000 CD loan from his father, Ado Antwi, and an idea that kept him up later than any nightclub ever could. Now the company sat at $150 billion CD, with holdings in Canada, Seoul, and Europe, numbers that made people assume the story was luck. Yor knew better. The story was discipline. His mother, Abina, had called the night before from Westview Medical Center between patients. Cardiologist calm, her voice, a steady pulse. His father, a popular politician and relentless strategist, offered advice disguised as jokes. And his siblings did what they always did, made noise around his seriousness. Ni with his practical questions, Su with her quiet observations. Kofo, his right-hand man, sending voice notes that started with business and ended with details about a new romance which occurred every 3 days. Yor spoke 4 languages, Akan Twi when he needed home, English when he needed speed, Korean and French when he needed leverage, and he cooked when his mind refused to rest. Knife skills, heat control, timing. Food was honest, if you burned it you owned it. Cars were similar. He respected a machine that did exactly what it was built to do. People though, people were the variable. For 9 years, he'd kept romance in the same category as unnecessary meetings, declined politely, moved on. The last time he'd trusted it, he'd come out of a long stretch of setbacks to find his fiancée, Mansa, giving his best friend Fredua the kind of attention she claimed he'd imagined. When he confronted her, she denied it at first, tried to twist his own eyes against him, until she finally told the truth like it was reasonable. He sees me. He has time for me. 45 minutes later, she walked out with a suitcase, and Yor stood in the wreckage, and decided he would never hand someone that kind of power again. His phone lit up with a message from Kofo. Conference room booked. Marketing pitch at 11. Don't scowl too much, big brother. Americans take it personally. Yor adjusted the cuff of his shirt and reached for his suit jacket. The US market wasn't a dream. It was a decision, and he expected everyone around him to treat it that way. Today's pitch was supposed to be simple. A local marketing executive presenting a strategy for introducing Global Fiber Solutions to Atlanta's business scene. Partners, visibility, credibility. As the elevator descended, he scanned the agenda on his phone. One name stood out. Sharp, elegant, Geneva Linnea Harrell. Yor didn't believe in fate, but something in his chest tightened anyway, as if his body recognized impact before his mind could explain it. Geneva stood at the end of the massive glass conference table, waiting for the CEO to arrive. She smoothed her natural hair, tucked back in a slick bun at the base of her neck, then fidgeted with the heart locket as she made small talk with Kofo and the others in the room. Breathe, she told herself. Inhale. Exhale. And in the middle of her exhale the door opened. There he was. Tall. Massive. A man whose frame seemed to claim the room before he said a word. His stare held the cold sheen of steel and something else. Something Geneva couldn't name. It found her anyway. She placed both hands on the edge of the table to steady herself because, suddenly, she did not trust her legs to remember how to be legs. He acknowledged her with a quick nod, surveyed the room, then took 3 unhurried strides to the chair at the opposite end of the table. Geneva's chest went off like quiet fireworks. She thanked God for her complexion, because its richness hid the heat climbing her face. Her breath turned thin. She swallowed harder than she meant to and prayed no one noticed. She looked down, rearranging papers that were already perfectly aligned. My lord, that is a beautiful man. She forced her mind back into place. Phew. Okay, Geneva. You have a presentation to give. A contract to get. Focus. This man is not your objective. Yao, Kofo, and 2 other executives listened as Geneva laid out a strategy designed to make Global Fiber Solutions' introduction to the US market both clean and profitable. She moved through unique selling propositions, benefits, budgets, and clear calls to action with a confidence that sounded effortless. Yor tried to stay with the numbers, the timelines, the logic, safe ground, but his attention kept slipping. Geneva was stunning, in a simple tan dress that accented the richness of her chocolate skin, hugging her 5'9" frame and full curves. Not delicate, not breakable. His gaze drifted to her eyes, deep almond, bright, with something faint behind them he couldn't place, and then to her mouth. God, her lips. He was still staring when she smiled, sudden and real. He cleared his throat and followed the line of her smile to Kofo, performing charm like it was a sport. For one sharp moment, irritation flashed through Yor, unreasonable and immediate. He faced Geneva again, cleared his throat a second time, and forced his focus back into the room. Get it together. Then his eyes caught her left hand. The ring. She was married. The presentation landed. Yao was impressed. Enough that he told Geneva to coordinate with his assistant so they could finalize details early next week. Geneva smiled, professional and composed again, and promised she'd follow up later that day. Yao gave a single nod and left the room, aware of the relief in her exhale, and annoyed with himself for noticing it. Back in the office, Yao replayed every moment of the presentation when Kofo strolled in, determined to frustrate him. "So what do you think about Miss Bradshaw?" Kofo asked. "Mrs. Yao corrected." Kofo blinked. "What?" "Mrs. Bradshaw," Yao repeated. "She's married." "Oh right, Mrs." Kofo said, leaning into it. "So what do you think about Mrs. Bradshaw? She's beautiful, right?" "She is married," Yao retorted, his irritation more pronounced than he cared to admit. Kofo's grin widened. "Well, brother, what am I detecting? Has some damsel penetrated the iron gate of the robotic Yao Obeng Antwi?" "Get out of my office, Kofo," Yao said, low. "I saw how you were looking at her like she was a dozen of sweet bofrot," Kofo continued, as if Yao hadn't spoken. "Kofo, she is married. Beauty or not, she is married," Yao said again, sharper than he intended. Kofo hummed. "Okay, answer me this. Are you mad at me for pointing out the obvious, or are you upset because she's married?" "Get out. Now." Yao forced through clenched teeth. Kofo laughed. "All right, brother, I'm going." "You'll let me know when Mrs. Bradshaw sets up that meeting for next week," he said, pausing at the door. "Unless you want to meet with her alone." He let the implication hang. Yao didn't blink. "Out, Kofo," he said simply. The door clicked shut behind Kofo, and the sudden quiet felt too loud. Yao stared at it for a second, jaw tight, then let his breath out slowly, as if he could press the irritation back into his ribs. Married. The word sat on his tongue like something bitter. It should have been enough to close the matter, to file her away as a vendor and move on. That was the rule. Clean lines, no complications. Yet when he closed his eyes he saw her again at the end of the glass table. Hands braced, shoulders squared, mouth steady even while something in her looked careful, like she was always listening for the moment the air changed. He had noticed the locket too, the way her fingers touched it, as if it was both comfort and distress. Yao opened his laptop, tried to return to numbers, contracts, timelines, safe things. But his focus kept drifting back to Geneva Bradshaw, and the flash of strain she hid behind professionalism. He reached for his phone and texted his assistant, short and precise. "Schedule the follow-up for the 18th at 9 a.m. in person." His thumb hovered, then he added, "Confirm Mrs. Bradshaw's availability, only her." He set the phone down like it weighed more than it should. "Get it together," he muttered to the empty office. Still, his pulse didn't agree. And somewhere beneath the discipline he'd built like armor, a different thought rose, uninvited and unsettling. "What are you hiding, Geneva?" On the ride back to the office, Geneva tried to do what she always did after a pitch. Replay every slide, every line, every pause, hunting for holes she needed to patch before the follow-up. But every path her mind took led her back to him, Yao, his hands, that steel gaze, the thunder of his voice, the breadth of his shoulders and the ease with which his presence filled the room. It all disrupted her, scattering her focus like papers in the wind. She drew a careful breath and, before she could stop herself, wondered what it would feel like to be held by him. "Girl, stop," she scolded herself. "You are married, and he is not your objective. Besides, a man like that probably has a woman, maybe two." Just as she forced herself to focus on the work ahead, her phone rang. "Mrs. Bradshaw," the voice on the other end said, matter-of-fact and efficient. "My name is Mrs. A.O. Patterson, Mr. Antwi's personal assistant. I'm calling to arrange a meeting next week, on the 18th at 9 a.m. Are you available?" Without thinking, Geneva heard herself answer, "Yes, I am." "Good," Mrs. Patterson said. "I'll send confirmation. Please contact me if you need to reschedule." The call ended, leaving Geneva blinking at her screen. She could have sworn Yao had told her to reach out to his assistant to set the meeting, yet his assistant had contacted her first. Geneva shouldn't have been surprised. Yao seemed like a man who waited for nothing, or no one. Geneva pulled her Genesis in front of the Bradshaw Group office, and sat for a moment with both hands on the steering wheel, gathering herself. Inside waited Blake, silky threat-made flesh, calculating, crouched in the corners of her day, always watching for the smallest infraction so he could deliver whatever punishment he'd chosen. A year ago, after Caitlin noticed and questioned him, after seeing far too many slip-and-fall bruises, Blake had adapted. Her face was off-limits now. Everything else, though, was fair game. The rest of her body had become his personal punching bag, and he took sick satisfaction in proving he didn't mind using it. She walked in and found Blake and his mother, Catherine, already seated in the small conference room, as if they'd been waiting for her to report in. Blake asked about the meeting. Geneva kept her voice steady. It went well. We have a follow-up next week to finalize details and sign the contract. The contract, Blake repeated, greed in his eyes that he didn't bother to hide. Let me see it before you send it. I want to make sure you get your worth, darling. The word darling slid out like a blade. Geneva stopped mid-step. It's a simple contract. Nothing that needs review, she said lightly, careful not to hand him an excuse for later. Blake turned fully toward her, smiling in a way that never reached his eyes. I'll be the judge of its simplicity, Geneva, he said, low and deliberate. Catherine added, all sugar and condescension. Yes, dear. I always let Gregory review my contracts. If you're not doing that, you should start. Remember, everything we do is for the good of the family. Geneva swallowed the anger, the fear, the taste of both. Okay. I'll send it shortly. Geneva rode the elevator to the 21st floor, checking her reflection for what felt like the 100th time. Everything had to be right. She'd changed clothes 4 times that morning before settling on a light grey pantsuit and a crisp white button-down. Her hair fell in a halo of soft curls. Platinum hoops. Her favorite perfume, the one she saved for special occasions. She told herself it had nothing to do with him. Then she heard how ridiculous that sounded. Everything she'd done that morning was because she was going to see him. Yao Obeng Antwi, CEO of Global Fiber Solutions, and the man she couldn't stop thinking about. Yor sat in the same boardroom chair where he'd first seen her, his thoughts running wild. Some harmless, some he wouldn't repeat out loud. He couldn't understand how one woman had managed to get under his skin so quickly. Mr. Antwi, Io said at the door, efficient as always. Mrs. Bradshaw is here. Would you like to meet in here, or in your office? Yor didn't hesitate. My office. Yor made the short trip down the hall, and waited in his office. When Geneva was escorted in, she took in the space at a glance. Masculine restraint softened by glass and white. Clean lines, quiet power. Yor sat at the small conference table in a high-back white leather chair, legs crossed, dressed in a deep navy suit that looked custom-made. He stood when she entered. Geneva's curls framed her face like a soft shield, and the grey suit made her skin glow. The scent she carried, honeysuckle, hit him like a memory he hadn't lived yet. Mrs. Bradshaw, he said, voice smooth and low, crossing the room to offer his hand. Good to see you again. Geneva took it, firm despite the current that zipped up her arm. Please, call me Geneva, and it's good to see you again, Mr. Antwi. Yor, he corrected, almost a murmur. Call me Yor. Okay, Yor. The way she said his name tightened something in his chest. His gaze held hers a second too long, unreadable. He smelled of leather and tobacco and money. His stare was disarming and intoxicating all at once. For a few suspended seconds, neither of them moved, until Yor stepped back first, gestured to the table and asked, Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee? Several hours later, Yor suggested a lunch break. Geneva agreed reluctantly, and they headed to the bistro on the first floor. Yor retrieved his suit coat from the back of a chair, and the movement pulled the fabric over muscle, arms, shoulders, back, like the suit had been designed to announce him. Geneva's breath caught. Don't look at him for the rest of this meeting, she vowed. She failed before they reached the elevator. Geneva felt him before he appeared. Yor saw it instantly, the way her shoulders tightened, the way her gaze dropped, the way her voice dimmed as if someone had turned the volume down on her. What happened? What changed? He followed the direction of her attention and spotted a man cutting through the room with purpose, eyes fixed on Geneva like a claim. Yor shifted in his seat. Subtle, instinctive, ready. Blake stopped at their table with a cool, controlled smile. Hi, honey. Didn't expect to see you here, he said, silky, Playful on the surface, predatory underneath. Geneva's smile appeared on command, but it never reached her eyes. Mr. Antwi and I decided to take a break, she managed, voice smaller than it had been all morning. She turned slightly, forcing the introductions. Blake, this is Mr. Yor Antwi. Mr. Antwi, this is my husband. Blake Bradshaw. The word husband scraped out of her. Blake's full attention shifted to Yor. Ah, he said, brightening as if this were a pleasant surprise. Nice to meet you, Yor. My wife speaks highly of you. He emphasized wife like a brand. He offered his hand. Yor took it, expression unreadable. We're fortunate to have someone with Mrs. Bradshaw's expertise working with Global Fiber Solutions, Yor said evenly. And we're glad to be working with her. Blake's eyes narrowed for the briefest flicker, then smoothed. He turned back to Geneva, pressed a kiss to her forehead and murmured, "See you when you get home, darling." It sounded like affection. It landed like a warning. Geneva went still, and Yor didn't miss it. Blake gave Yor one last measuring look and walked away. After that, lunch was mostly small talk and silence that sat heavy between bites. Geneva asked to reschedule the remainder of the meeting for later that week. Yor agreed, then asked quietly, "Are you okay?" Geneva nodded yes, but fear was written into her posture, and that was a problem Yor couldn't ignore. The ride home was exhausting. Geneva's mind jumped from the pleasure of Yor to the painful reality of Blake. She didn't know exactly what she was walking into, but she knew Blake had been furious at the bistro. His silky words had been laced with venom, and the kiss on her forehead had felt like a warning wrapped in sugar. God, I have to get away from him, she thought, and the thought brought its own kind of terror. She had tried to leave twice, each time Blake found her. His parents, money and prestige made police reports disappear. Employers suddenly rescinded job offers, contracts cancelled, and landlords remembered they'd promised the apartment to someone else. And after he found her, the beating was relentless, particularly vicious, as if he needed to punish her for the very idea of escape. She turned onto her street and forced her hands to stay steady on the wheel. "Stop it, Geneva, this is your life." The words came hard and bitter. "No one is coming to save you. Not even Yor. So find a way to live through it." She parked, sat for a moment, and listened. Through the door she heard voices, laughter, and the television turned up loud to accommodate Gregory, who refused to wear his much-needed hearing aid. Relief loosened her chest. Good. A short reprieve. Her in-laws are here. When she stepped inside, the scene was familiar. Catherine and Blake sat in the kitchen with Cuban rum daiquiris, their laughter too bright, too practiced. Caitlin was at the dining table with her laptop open, fingers moving fast. Gregory had claimed the living room, eyes on the business news, volume high enough to rattle the walls. "Good evening, everyone," Geneva said. "Hi, sweetheart," Gregory called, barely turning away from the television. "Hi, sis," Caitlin said cheerfully, eyes still on her screen. Catherine took a long sip, lifted her glass in a lazy salute, and said, "Hi, darling." Blake offered a strained smile. "Hi, babe." Geneva crossed the room and kissed his cheek, trying to read his mood. His face stayed stone, polite for the audience, unreadable for her. Her eyes drifted to Caitlin, and Geneva let herself offer a small, careful smile. In another life, they might have been close, but being connected to Blake made Geneva someone Caitlin tolerated. Useful when convenient, invisible when not. Catherine was as cold and ruthless as her son, proof the apple didn't fall far from the tree. Gregory had checked out of this family a long time ago. He carried an entire second life in Powder Springs that Catherine pretended not to know about, even though Gregory didn't bother to hide the woman or the two sons. Later, after the laughter died and doors closed behind them, the house felt smaller. Geneva stood at the bathroom sink, wiping off her makeup with slow, careful strokes, as if removing it too fast might call something down on her. Behind her, Blake's voice cut through the quiet. "So you like embarrassing me?" he snarled. Geneva froze, then turned just enough to see his reflection. She made her voice small on purpose. "I'm not sure what you mean, Blake. You don't know?" The hit came fast, swift, deliberate. The next moments blurred into impact and breath, and the hard edge of tile. When it was over, Geneva curled on the floor, hovering between excruciating pain and a numbness so deep it felt like leaving her body behind. The next morning, Blake brought her breakfast in bed, as if the night before had been a dream she'd made up to frighten herself. He set a small box beside the tray. Inside was a pearl necklace. "It'll never happen again," he promised softly, then sighed like the victim of her choices. "You can't push me like that, Geneva. You know what you do to me." The apology twisted into an accusation before she could even swallow. Geneva stared at the pearls until the shine blurred. She hated him. Not with heat, but with the cold clarity of truth. Yor couldn't get the scene at the bistro out of his mind. Geneva had gone from poised and brilliant to small and distant the moment her husband showed up. Yor tasted the word husband with pure disdain. He'd seen the terror she tried to hide when Blake kissed her forehead, seen it in the way her shoulders locked and her voice thinned until she cut their meeting short. If that coward was abusing her in any way, Yor would destroy him, and anyone who tried to stand in the way. He'd already put people on it. By evening, a report sat on his desk, clean pages holding dirty truths. The Bradshaws came from old money. Blake lived off his parents' wealth and reputation. He had several brushes with the law, but nothing ever hardened into a formal charge. What did surface, quietly, like a bruise under makeup, were restraining orders. 3. 2. Filed by Geneva. As Yar read, a slow heat climbed his spine. The language was clinical, but the meaning wasn't. Allegations of violence, control, fear. Yor leaned back, forcing his body to unclench, forcing his mind to move from reaction to strategy. It made sense now. Her stillness at the bistro, her mood after Blake walked away, the way relief had flickered and died in her face. And the contract fee, exorbitant, nearly 3 times market rate, suddenly looked less like ambition and more like someone else's hand on her business. When Yor saw the number, he hadn't flinched. He hadn't dismissed her like he would have anyone else. He'd signed, then told Mrs. Patterson to pass it to accounting for payment. Remembering Geneva's fear reignited his rage. "How dare he?" Yor muttered to the empty room. Yar was still lost in his thoughts when Kofo walked into his office. "What's up, brother?" Kofo asked in that insufferable way only he could master. But one look at Yar's face wiped the humor clean. Kofo's mind raced through recent events and came up empty. Nothing that should have put that steel rage in Yar's eyes. "Yar," Kofo said cautiously, crossing the space between the door and the desk. "What's up?" The question came again, this time stripped of jokes. Yar blinked, as if he was just realizing he wasn't alone, then slid the report across the desk. Kofo picked up the papers, brow furrowing deeper with every page. 20 minutes later he looked up, jaw set into the same hard line as yours, his eyes dark and dangerous. He spoke slowly, measured. "Yor, she can't live like this." "We can't." "I know," Yor cut in, his voice just as controlled. "Geneva and I are meeting tomorrow. I'll have a better understanding of the situation after." Kofo stood, staring at him for several seconds. Then he smiled, not mischievous, not teasing. The smile of a man who understood the assignment and had already decided to move. "Until tomorrow, brother," Kofo said, turning to leave. Geneva stood in front of the mirror, studying her reflection. It had been 3 days since Blake hit her for embarrassing him. 3 days since he accused her of flirting with Yor. The bruise on the side of her face wasn't as visible as it had been, but the remnant of his fist still lived under her skin. Blake had been careless this time, letting jealousy override his usual avoid-the-face rule. Geneva hoped careful hair placement and makeup would do the trick. She had become a master at hiding bruises, internal and external, and she prayed her skills wouldn't fail her today. Blake had been sugary sweet ever since, but he hadn't missed a single opportunity to remind her she'd brought it on herself. He'd seen the way she looked at Yor, not with disdain or indifference like she did when she forced herself to look at him, but with interest, with ease, with possibility. Blake didn't like it. It scared him. And she had to pay for that. She took the elevator to the 21st floor and checked her reflection one last time before the doors opened. Her body performed a series of small acrobatics at the thought of seeing him again. Heat, nerves, a strange flutter that made her palms damp. She steadied her breath. "Geneva, he is not your objective." Yor saw the discoloration on the right side of her face immediately. His blood ran cold. Something flashed across his expression. Discomfort, irritation, anger. Something raw that Geneva could feel without knowing its name. "Good morning, Yor," she said smoothly as she glided toward him. determined to act normal. God. Even with her careful attempt to hide her bruises, she was still beautiful. A woman who had invaded his thoughts, his dreams, his fantasies. Geneva, Yor said slowly, as if savoring the taste of her name. They shook hands, and when he guided her toward the conference table, Yor's palm settled gently at the top of her back. Geneva flinched before she could stop it. His hands stilled. He noticed. "How is Blake?" he asked, voice even. Geneva stiffened. He noticed that too. She cleared her throat, pitching her voice a shade higher than usual. "He's fine," she said, eyes sliding away from his. Yor watched the avoidance like it confirmed what he already knew. Mrs. Patterson had ordered lunch for them, and Kofo stopped by. "Just to say hi." His eyes went straight to Geneva's face. He masked it quickly, but the message landed. Kofo gave Yor a look, knowing, grinned, then excused himself and left them alone. Yor and Geneva sat across from each other at the conference table, eyeing the small smorgasbord Mrs. Patterson had arranged from an African fusion restaurant downstairs. The room filled with bold aromas: Jollof pasta, Assen lasagna, yam bake, cayenne biscoff and sobolo cooling in a sweating bottle. Over lunch they talked about everything and nothing. Yol told her about his family, about growing up in Ghana, and why he started Global Fiber Solutions. Geneva spoke about her childhood, her father, and how her world collapsed when he died, a loss she hadn't fully learned how to carry. "Does he hit you?" The question was direct, simple and explosive. It caught Geneva off guard. She stared at him, mind racing, warning her to deny it. Lie, act offended, protect the story. But her body was tired of protecting the wrong person. "Yes," she said, voice soft but resolute. "Yes, he does." Her eyes dropped, and her hands fidgeted in her lap. She glanced up, but she couldn't withstand the weight of Yor's gaze. The look from earlier had a name now: rage. Yor turned his chair and closed the short distance between them. When he spoke, his voice was gentle, protective. He lifted his hand and moved a curl away from her cheek, with a tenderness that made Geneva's throat tighten. "Did he do this?" he asked quietly, eyes fixed on the bruise. The heat of his palm and the softness of his voice broke something open. Geneva closed her eyes. Her nerves sounded alarms from every corner of her body. And the tears she'd been holding back refused to stay hidden any longer. They spilled, hot and silent. She didn't trust her voice, so she only nodded, once, then again. Yes. Yor almost came undone at the sight of Geneva's tears. In that moment, she looked so small, so exhausted, and something in him locked into place. She needs to be protected. He didn't question it. He simply vowed, with the quiet certainty of a man used to keeping promises. With one swift movement, Yao lifted her and carried her to the large white leather sofa at the far end of his office. Geneva clung to him as if her life depended on it, arms tightening around his neck on instinct, breath catching in small broken pulls. He held her closer and lowered his mouth near her ear. "Maida," he whispered, "you are safe now." They sat on the sofa, with Yor's arms forming a fortress around her, and Geneva wept as if she were purging 30 years from her lungs. Minutes stretched, 10, 20, 30, until her sobs dulled into shudders. Yor stroked her hair slowly, anchoring her. "Mida," he murmured again and again, the words soft in Akantui. "Mida, my love." Reality began to dismantle the cocoon she'd been wrapped in. The full weight of what had just happened crashed down. He was a client. She had confessed the truth. The truth. Geneva tried to sit up, to disentangle herself, but Yor's arms tightened, and she stayed where she was, pinned not by force but by safety. She didn't know how to refuse. And then she became acutely aware of him, the steady hardness of his body, the even rhythm of his breathing, the sure beat of his heart beneath her ear, the scent of leather and something expensive. Her body started those acrobatics again. Heat, nerves, longing, everything she'd been trying not to feel. For a brief moment she leaned into it and let it take her. "I have to go," Geneva heard herself say, and the voice that came out was low and unfamiliar. She swallowed and tried again, as if repetition could make it true. "I have to go." "No," Yor said simply. Geneva pulled back from the warmth of his chest. He loosened his hold just enough for her to look up. Confusion flickered across her face. "No," she echoed. "What do you mean, no? I have to go home." Her voice weakened, traitorous. "I can't stay here. Blake will." The words snagged in her throat. She stared down at her lap, hands twisting together. Then she forced herself to finish, half plea and half panic. I have to go, Yor. You're not going anywhere, Yor said evenly. I can't let you go back there. You're staying with me. What are you talking about, Yor? Geneva pleaded, shaking her head. I have a life I can't just walk away from. Why not? Yor asked. Geneva exhaled like she was carrying the whole truth in her lungs. Because he won't let me go, she said, voice scraping. I've tried. He always finds me, and he always makes me come back. Her eyes lifted to his for a second, warning and worry tangled together. I can't put you in this kind of danger. A slow smile touched the edge of Yor's mouth, soft, almost amused, because he loved that she thought she needed to protect him. He leaned in slightly. Geneva? He began, measured. I won't let you go back to that coward. I protect the people I love. The word hung between them, heavy and impossible. Love, Geneva repeated, half aloud and half to herself. I don't know how to process that. I've taken great care keeping my feelings for you in a neat box, and now. Her voice trailed off, overwhelmed by its own honesty. Yor shook his head gently. I'm not asking you to define anything, he said, softer now, almost pleading. Just let me keep you safe, Geneva, please. Geneva sat there, trying to let the gravity of what was unfolding settle into something she could process. Her mind exploded in every direction at once. For the first time in more than a year, she let herself hope, let herself dream, let herself imagine a life without Blake, without fear. The weight of it crashed over her. Small shivers came first, then full convulsions as her body finally released what it had been storing. Her breathing turned ragged, her heart pounded, her eyes burned, filling to the brim, demanding to be released. She reached for Yor, like she was reaching for air. His arms wrapped around her immediately, his voice a steadying rope. Meda, you're safe, he murmured. You will be okay. I would give my life protecting you. Geneva tried to speak, but the words knew they were not needed, so they refused to come. Instead, she clung to him until her body began to calm. Then, barely above a whisper, she said, okay, I'll go with you. Yor felt his own body loosen, realizing only then that he hadn't been as certain as he'd sounded that she would choose him. Where are your car keys and house keys? Yor asked. Geneva reached into her bag and handed them over. Yor made a phone call she couldn't follow. Rapid Akan Twi, then ended it like a decision. Your things are being delivered to my home, he said. Your car is being delivered back to Blake's. My car? Geneva asked, startled. Yes. The Genesis he gave you last year for your birthday. Yes, she said slowly. Yor's voice turned flat. He had a tracking system installed at the manufacturer level. You can get another car, without him. Geneva opened her mouth to ask how he knew that, then shut it again. They were questions for another time. Yor reached into a drawer and placed a phone in her hand. Here. Geneva frowned. I have a phone. Yes, he said, unmoved. A phone connected to him, probably tracked by him too. Geneva slid into the soft, buttery leather seat of Yor's black Maybach, and realized, with a strange clarity, that she had never actually experienced luxury, only expensive cages. When they pulled up to Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, Yor looked at her and said, call Blake, tell him you're divorcing him, in your own words. The thought of hearing Blake's voice sent tremors through her, the same little convulsions that had seized her in Yor's office. Yor reacted instantly, cupping her face in his hands. Meda, he said, eyes steady on hers. You are safe. I'm here. I would give my life protecting you. Geneva dragged in a deep breath, dialed Blake, and held the phone to her ear, like it was a weapon pointed back at her. When he answered, she didn't give herself time to reconsider. I want a divorce, she said. I'm done. Before he could respond, she ended the call. Yor took the phone from her, rolled down his window, and handed it to a man standing nearby who disappeared without a word. Geneva stared after him, disoriented. What just happened? He'll track your phone, Yor said calmly. He'll find it here at the airport. He'll pull security footage. They won't see you or my guy dropping it, and they'll assume you got on a plane somewhere. He'll spend the next few days combing through surveillance, looking for you. A faint, mischievous smile cut across his mouth. I couldn't let my office be the last place your phone was traced, he added, matter of fact. Blake sat at his desk, eyes fixed on his phone. He called Geneva back twice, 3 times, but it went straight to voicemail, then to nothing. When he opened the car app, he saw her Genesis parked at the house. Relief flickered, thin and sharp. Then he tried to access their security cameras and discovered the feed had been disabled. His jaw tightened. He pulled up the location tracker on her phone. Last seen, Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. Rage and fear washed through him in the same breath. He dialed again. Straight to voicemail. "You will pay for this," he whispered, grabbing his keys and storming out of the office. He slid behind the wheel of his Cybertruck and drove like the city owed him clearance. He made it home in record time, burst into the townhouse, and bellowed her name. "Geneva, where are you?" He moved from room to room, rage filling the space ahead of him, but every door opened to the same answer: nothing. He stood in the living room and tried her number again. Straight to voicemail. He ran back to their bedroom and saw what he'd missed the first time. The closet, emptier. The drawers, hollowed out. Her things. All her things were gone. He spun back into the living room and noticed the white envelope on the console table. Blake tore it open. Divorce papers. Tucked inside was a handwritten note in a script he didn't recognize. "Sign it or not, it is over." He called her mother next. "Eleanor, how are you?" Blake said with easy charm, as if he weren't standing in the townhouse in a full panic. "Have you seen Geneva? Is she there?" "No," Eleanor said coolly. "Is something wrong?" she added. "No," Blake replied quickly. "Nothing wrong, thanks, Eleanor." He ended the call before she could ask another question. Eleanor stared at her phone after the line went dead. The call felt wrong. She dialed Geneva, voicemail. "Darling, it's me," she said, keeping her voice steady even as worry rose. "I'm concerned. Blake just called me looking for you. Call me back. Love you, Mum." As soon as Eleanor ended the message, her phone rang. "Mum, it's me," Geneva said. "Hi, baby, where are you? Are you okay?" Eleanor asked, half panic, half relief. "I'm fine." "I left Blake," Geneva said, and the words sat there for a moment, like they needed permission to exist. "I'm safe. I'll explain later." Eleanor let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Baby, as long as you're okay, that's all I need to know. You're sure you're safe?" "Yes, Mum," Geneva said, quieter now. "I'm more than safe. I won't be around for a while because I know Blake will be looking for me. He'll probably contact you soon." "He already did," Eleanor cut in. "I just got off the phone with him." A pause. "You okay?" Geneva asked. "Yes, darling. I'm fine," Eleanor said, and there was steel under the softness now. "I can handle Blake now that I know you got away. I love you, Mum. I love you, baby. Talk soon." The line went dead, but Eleanor kept the phone in her hand for a long moment, as if letting go might invite fear back in. Geneva's breath caught when she stepped into Yor's penthouse. It was luxury made physical, masculine, immaculate. Floor-to-ceiling glass framed the skyline. Daylight spilled across dark stone, smoked mirrors, and sharp-lined pieces in black and cognac leather. The air smelled of cedar and vetiver. Original artwork sat under gallery lighting. Heavy abstract canvases, a brutalist metal sculpture, and an oversized photograph that turned the city into a trophy. Even the silence felt curated, softened by thick rugs and the quiet gleam of glass. "Your home is beautiful," Geneva said, still a little breathless. "Thanks," Yor replied simply, then, softer. "Come, follow me." Yor walked her through the penthouse, pointing out rooms as if he wasn't sure what to do with how quiet she'd become. He led her to a large bedroom at the end of the hall and opened the door. Geneva stopped. All her belongings were there. The closet was full. Her dresses, blouses, shoes arranged as if they'd always belonged. The bathroom was stocked with expensive soaps, lotions, bath oils and gels lined up with careful intention. The bed was massive, layered with pillows and sheets so soft the thread count felt like an impossibility. "I hope you like it," Yor asked, the question landing almost sheepish. "Like?" Geneva's voice caught. "I love it." She turned and hugged him, and her body melted into his as if it had been searching for him for years. The embrace lasted a second too long, and Yor lifted her chin gently. His kiss was slow at first, careful, asking. Geneva leaned in and answered him without words, and the restraint he wore so easily began to fray. Then he broke away, breathing hard, and muttered something under his breath in a Cantui. "Geneva," he said, voice rough. "Not like this, not now." Her eyes opened, confusion flickering through the warmth. "What's wrong? What did I do wrong?" "Meda, you did nothing wrong," he said, and it sounded like it hurt him to say it. "This isn't the time. We have things we need to take care of first." He took one last long look at her. "Meet me in my office. We need to talk." and then he walked out. Blake's hands shook as he dialed his mother. Catherine answered on the first ring. "Hi, Blake. Mum, Geneva is gone," he said, the words tumbling out. "She left divorce papers in the living room. She took all her things. She left the car and cut off her phone." Catherine heard the panic underneath his anger. "Slow down," she ordered. "What are you saying?" Blake huffed, annoyed now, voice rising. "I'm saying Geneva is gone. She called me and told me she wanted a divorce. I can't find her anywhere." He swallowed hard. "Her phone tracked to the airport, but I don't know where she would have gone." "Have you called Eleanor?" Catherine asked. "Yes. She claims she doesn't know anything." Blake snapped. "I don't believe her." "I'm on my way," Catherine said. The call ended, and Blake was left pacing, dialing Geneva's number every few minutes as he rapidly lost control. "Geneva, you don't walk out on me," he spat into the empty townhouse. Yor was sitting in a high-back cognac leather chair when Geneva entered, relaxed in the way of a man who was always 3 moves ahead. He'd changed into a fitted light blue short-sleeve pullover that outlined his chiseled frame, and a pair of jeans that looked too expensive to be called casual. Geneva's breath went a little unsteady. The heat from earlier was still fresh in her mind. Yor looked up, smiled once, and stood, motioning her to the chair beside him. Neither of them spoke about what happened in her bedroom, but it sat between them like a guest who had overstayed. Yor cleared his throat, trying to conceal how his body reacted to the sight of her in a simple pale green sundress. "Geneva," Yor began slowly, "I need you to understand something. Until you are out of danger, you will do exactly what I say at all times." She nodded, eyes fixed, absorbing his tone more than his words. "We have eyes on Blake," he continued. "He's spiraling, and that makes him dangerous. His mother is calling in favors, trying to find you." Yor's gaze sharpened. "They've flagged your credit cards, and they have someone watching your mother's home." "My mother," Geneva whispered, the full weight of it landing in her chest. "Don't worry," Yor said immediately. "My men won't let anything happen to her. But this means you have to stay away from her until we neutralize the threat." Geneva nodded again, jaw tight, letting the fear settle into something quieter, something she could manage. Yor continued, laying out the plan like it was a contract he refused to lose. "You do not go anywhere alone, not without me, Kofo, or one of my men. You do not tell anyone your location. You'll work out of the office down the hall, and you'll use my private entrance at the Midtown office. Here." He handed her a slim access card. "Keep it on you." Geneva took it with careful fingers. "You can't take on new clients for a while," he added. "And my lawyers are having Blake served today. Once that happens, it becomes public record, and it will feed his anger. So we have to be careful. We cannot get distracted." His eyes flicked to hers, and Geneva understood exactly what he meant. Her bedroom, his mouth on hers, the way her body had wanted to forget the world. She looked down at the card in her hand and nodded. "Okay," she said softly, as if agreement was the only thing keeping her brave. "Blake Bradshaw?" "Yes," Blake snapped. "You've been served," an unassuming man said, pressing a brown envelope into his hand before sprinting away. Blake stared at the envelope for half a second, then ripped it open and scanned the first page. "Irreconcilable differences." The words jumped off the paper like a stalker finding its prey. A sound tore out of him, primal, ragged, rage so hot it blurred his vision. He stalked back into the office with the papers clenched in his fist and grabbed his keys off the desk. Catherine and Caitlin looked up at him, their expressions a mix of alarm and calculation. Blake didn't explain. He didn't have the patience. He just walked out. Blake drove through Atlanta like a man possessed. He hadn't planned a destination, but his anger steered him anyway, straight to Yao Obeng Antwi. When he found himself in front of Global Fiber Solutions, his pulse hammered with the kind of certainty only obsession could produce. Before he could talk himself out of it, Blake marched to the lobby kiosk and searched the directory. Global Fiber Solutions, Suite 2100. He pressed the button and used the elevator ride to steady his breathing. The doors opened to a quiet floor and a man with a weapon on his hip blocking the path. "ID," the officer said, expression blank. "And the purpose of your visit?" Blake lifted his chin. "I'm here to see Mr. Antwi." The officer disappeared behind massive bamboo and glass doors. A few minutes later, two well-dressed men emerged. Blake recognized Yor immediately. The other man was slightly smaller, built solid, his gaze sharp. "Good afternoon, Blake," Yor said smoothly. "Hello, Yor," Blake replied, forcing the words through clenched teeth. "Why are you here?" Yor asked, sounding more bored than curious. Blake swallowed. "I'm looking for my wife. Geneva." "Oh," Yor said, as if the name meant nothing. "Have you seen her?" "Yes," Yor answered. The smaller man, Kofo, Blake realized, shifted slightly at Yor's bluntness. Blake's anger flared, then wavered when he met the coldness in both men's eyes. "Is she here?" he asked, and hated how close it sounded to pleading. "No," Yor replied. "Can you tell me the last time you saw her?" Blake tried again, voice thinning. "This morning," Yor said. Blake blinked hard. "You saw my wife this morning. Where?" Yor took a single step forward, and Blake corrected his own posture on instinct. "Blake," Yor said evenly, "if your wife isn't telling you where she is, I don't believe it's my place to tell you either." Blake lifted his hands in a show of reason he didn't feel. "Yor, my wife left our home yesterday and cut off communication. Her family doesn't know where she is. We don't know if she's hurt or in danger. I'm her husband. I need to know where she is so I can protect her." The lie tasted sweet on his tongue. He started to add something uglier, but Yao cut him off without raising his voice. "Geneva is fine," Yao said, each word iced over. "She is being well taken care of. She is protected. She is not anywhere she is being beaten or abused in any way." The cold certainty sent a shiver down Blake's spine. Yor turned as if the conversation was already over, then looked back once. "I know Geneva," he said, dismissive. "She will tell you, if she hasn't already, what she wants. I suggest you comply, Mr. Bradshaw." Yor and Kofo disappeared behind the bamboo and glass doors. The armed officer escorted Blake back to the elevator and informed him, politely and firmly, that he would need to request a meeting if he wished to speak with Mr. Antwi, or Mr. Antwi's associates again. As soon as the doors closed, Kofo exhaled. "Well, brother," he said lightly, like he was reporting the weather, "the match has been lit." Yor's shoulders were just beginning to loosen. He wanted to snap that coward's neck. It took everything in him to stand there and not do it. She was with him, he knew. Blake's mind screamed it on a loop as he barreled through Atlanta. He stabbed at his phone and called his mother. Catherine answered, and Blake yelled, "She's with him, she told him everything." "What?" Catherine asked, honestly confused. "With who?" Blake forced himself to breathe and told her, about the bistro, about being served, about going to see Yor, and what Yor had said. By the time he finished, tears were sliding down his face without permission, his body tight, his heart pounding so hard it felt visible. "This can't be happening," he rasped. Then, lower, uglier, "She will pay, Geneva will pay." Catherine's voice sharpened. "We need to strategize, not react, son. Come back to the office. I'm calling a family meeting." Blake ended the call and tore through the streets again, rage consuming every inch of him. "I had a visitor today," Yor said flatly. Geneva's blood ran cold. "Blake?" "Yes," Yor said. "Did he cause a scene?" she asked, half not wanting to know. "No, he asked about you, and I told him what I wanted him to know." Geneva swallowed. "Does he know I'm with you?" "Yes," Yor replied. She let the weight of that sit for a second. "What's next?" "We go to dinner," Yor said. Geneva blinked. "Dinner?" "Yes. Dinner." He repeated like it was the simplest thing in the world. "Get ready, our reservation is at 8. Geneva dressed in a soft pink dress that hugged her curves without trying too hard. When she walked out, Yor closed his eyes for a second, muttered something under his breath in Akantwi, and cursed his body for betraying him so easily. The faint hint of honeysuckle branded itself onto his senses. Geneva found him waiting by the door in soft yellow button-down and charcoal grey slacks. For a dangerous second, her mind flashed back to the first day she'd seen him, and the thought slipped out. Silent but absolute. "My God, that is a beautiful man." The conversation in the car flowed with an ease that surprised them both. They talked about family and dreams, and even embarrassing first crushes. Yor found himself laughing at the way Geneva laughed at her own stories, even when she messed up the punchline. Her laughter was contagious, bright enough to make him forget the threat waiting outside his walls. And right there, with the city lights sliding past the windows, Yor made himself a promise. He would destroy anything that tried to silence that laugh. Yor guided his G-Wagon into VIP parking and came around to open Geneva's door. When he offered his arm, it felt natural, almost inevitable, and Geneva hated how quickly her body believed in safety beside him. They were seated within minutes, the first course barely touched before they slipped into laughter again. 30 minutes into the meal, Geneva was mid-laugh at a story Yor was telling about his mother, when Yor's body went rigid. His eyes narrowed. Geneva felt the shift in the air and braced without knowing why. Then she saw him, Blake, cutting through the restaurant with rage on a leash. His eyes traveled straight to the woman sitting across from Yor. Geneva. His Geneva. He stormed toward their table, and the closer he got, the more Geneva felt the evil of him like a shadow crawling up her spine. She looked at Yor, searching for reassurance, strength, protection. Blake stopped, breathing ragged through clenched teeth, and aimed all his venom at her. Get up, we're going home. Geneva's hands started to shake. Yor didn't raise his voice, he simply said, no. He stood and positioned himself between Blake and Geneva. Blake turned on him. This is between me and my wife. You have nothing. Yor took a step closer to Blake. Blake's words died in his throat. Two large men appeared at either side of Blake as if summoned by Yor's calm. At first Geneva thought they were with Blake, but soon realized from the sheer terror in Blake's face that she was wrong. Yor's voice dropped, cold, calculating, promising danger. She is with me. She is not going anywhere with you. You will not bother her again. Leave. Now. Blake looked between them, rage fighting fear. Around them people suddenly found their plates fascinating, eyes nervously averted, as if humiliation could be contagious. Blake hesitated. Yor tilted his head slightly. You look like a man about to make a bad decision, he said evenly. I advise you to leave. Anything else will not turn out well for you. Blake's gaze snapped to Geneva. This is not over, he spat. Yes, Yor said, sitting back down as if Blake were already gone. Yes, it is, Blake. Geneva had made herself small through the entire exchange, almost invisible, and the sight stoked Yor's rage all over again. He reached across the table, took her hand gently and said, Maida, don't worry, I will not let anything happen to you. He pressed a kiss to her knuckles, and he saw the tension slowly drain from her body. Outside the restaurant, Blake stood frozen, gazing through the glass as a sinking realization washed over him. He understood something he had never been forced to face before. He was losing his grip, his control, his wife, the Bradshaw Group. The weight of that last thought almost shut his nervous system down. He knew he had to act fast, before anyone discovered what he and his mother had done. The ride home was heavy with silence. Geneva sat quietly beside Yor, who, sensing her need for space, didn't push her. Instead, he allowed her the time to process, reflect, and absorb the tumult of earlier events. Geneva replayed the scene in her mind, noticing the fear, no, the terror, in Blake's face when Yor spoke. She observed how the smooth, rhythmic tone of Yor's voice failed to reach his eyes. They were cold, dark, focused. She saw how he stood between her and Blake, silently protecting her without a word. And those two large men, had they always been there? She pushed the question aside, deciding to save them for another time. As Yor parked the SUV in the garage, he gently took her hand and led her toward the house. She instinctively leaned into him, allowing the strength of his arm to quiet her racing mind. Once inside, he took her to her room and asked softly if she needed anything. His voice was careful, soothing. She shook her head, softly whispering no. He kissed her on the forehead and said, "Good night, Maida." As he turned to leave, her hand reached out and touched his arm. He paused, feeling an electric current run through him. "Maida?" she asked, with sweet curiosity. He brought her hand to his lips, kissed it gently, and simply said, "My love," before leaving. Geneva moved her hand to her chest, caressing the spot where his lips had just touched. She allowed herself to be lost in the possibilities of him, and realized, without a doubt, that she was completely in love with Yao Antwi. The thought of loving him and being loved by him overwhelmed her senses. She couldn't absorb everything it represented. Deciding to find solace, she took a shower, and then slept. Meanwhile, Yao was in his room, fighting the urge to go to Geneva. The faint scent of honeysuckle lingered on his shirt, teasing his senses. "Get it together, man," he muttered, shaking his head violently, as if trying to free himself from an invisible hold. He knew she had to come to him. He couldn't force her. Still, sleep evaded him. Frustrated, he did what he always did when life refused to bend to his will. He worked. Blake sat in his truck, rage completely overtaking him. The image of that bastard kissing Geneva, his wife, was strangling him. He beat his fists against the steering wheel, thinking desperately, "You gotta get control of this. You gotta get control of her." His mind was a storm of fury and desperation. Then he noticed something on his windshield. He got out of the truck, heart pounding, and grabbed it. It was a simple note, scrawled hastily, but with deadly intent. "Sign the divorce papers or explain appraisals/titles." Blake's blood ran cold. "Mum, she's with him," he yelled into his phone, not bothering to wait for Catherine to greet him. "Where?" Catherine's voice was calm but firm. "At St. Cecilia," he answered, voice trembling. He quickly recounted what had happened, the note left on his windshield, and his frantic thoughts. There was a pause on the line. Several seconds, then Catherine spoke. "Your dad is here. I'll be at your house in 30 minutes. The call ended. Blake stared at the note, trembling. "Let me see the note. What exactly did it say?" Catherine asked, her voice gentle but probing. She examined it carefully, as if trying to extract more from the few words. She leaned back in her chair, finishing off her vodka. "Okay," she said slowly. "Blake, you have to grant her the divorce." Before she could finish, Blake sprang from his chair, yelling, "No, I won't. I can't. She's my wife. I won't let her go. I won't let that arrogant bastard win." Catherine, prepared for his reaction, raised her voice. "Shut up, Blake, and listen. Whoever sent this knows more than we want them to know. If you fight this, there will be an investigation. We'll lose everything." Her voice cracked with emphasis. "Houses, cars, the company, our freedom. Do you understand what I'm saying?" A deafening silence fell. Blake sat, the weight of her words crushing him. His mind flashed to the illegal title transactions, the forgery, the less than honest appraisals. The full gravity of what was at stake hit him with the force of a wrecking ball. His body convulsed as if trying to hold himself together. He slowly got up and walked to the living room, retrieving the document from his briefcase. Without a word, he signed it. Then, with trembling hands, he threw the papers onto the floor and wept. Not for his marriage, not because he still loved Geneva. No, he wept because he had lost the control he had. The next morning, Geneva awoke to amazing smells wafting from the kitchen. The aroma lifted her from sleep like a gentle hand. She quickly freshened up, threw on a pair of sweatpants and a midriff t-shirt, and tied her hair in a messy ponytail. Drawn by the delicious scent, she followed it down the hall. There, standing in the kitchen, was Yor. He was dressed in a black tank top and grey pajama pants, flipping a perfectly round pancake with ease. Music, old-school R&B, played softly in the background. His muscular body moved with a rhythm that seemed almost hypnotic. Geneva's breath caught. She stopped in her tracks, afraid her legs might give out, and gazed at him, captivated. Yor, noticing her presence, turned, still holding the pan. He took a deep breath to steady himself, then cleared his throat. "Good morning," he said softly. "Sleep well?" "Yes," she responded. "You? Did you sleep well?" she asked. "Yes," he lied. "I'm preparing breakfast," he added, still trying to sound casual. "I see," she teased. "Are we expecting a small army?" She grinned playfully. Yor smiled back. "I didn't know what you wanted, so I prepared a little of everything." "Oh, I see. I'd love to help," Geneva offered. "You can set the table," he instructed. "Kofo is stopping by with his latest friend," he added, a mischievous glint in his eyes. Geneva was busy arranging the dishes on the table in the sunroom when Natalie Cole's "I Can't Say No" drifted through the speakers, her favorite song. Without even realizing it, Geneva was swaying and singing along, hitting every note, as if the song was written just for her voice. Her body moved with the rhythm, lost in the melody and the sweet possibilities of love. At some point, she didn't remember when, she abandoned the table, letting the music and her dreams take over. With her eyes closed, hands pressed gently to her chest, she swayed to the gentle rhythm, singing as if she were the only one in the house. It was a moment she hadn't known since life had shown her how cruel it could be, until now. When the song ended, Geneva slowly opened her eyes to Yor's intense stare. Before embarrassment could take hold, she felt the warm, firm presence before her. Yor had closed the gap between them and gathered her in his arms. Without hesitation, he kissed her, like a man claiming what was his, like she was his. Geneva melted into his embrace, allowing him to explore every inch of her mouth. She clung to him, not just out of passion, but out of necessity. Her legs, trembling and refusing to cooperate, betrayed her. Yor murmured between kisses, voice thick with emotion. "Maida," he whispered softly. "Mehaya wa mea wo," he added in Akantwi. Suddenly, the kitchen door swung open. "Hey, where is everyone?" Kofo called out, approaching with his usual boisterous energy. Yor lifted his head sharply, stepping back from Geneva. His eyes darkened, and his breath hitched. Geneva instinctively leaned back against the table, trying to regain her composure, her heart pounding. Kofo burst in farther, waving his hand. "Somebody got it smelling good in here." He stopped mid-sentence, eyes flickering between Geneva and Yor. Then, with that mischievous grin he always wore, he drawled, "What do we have here? Are we interrupting something?" During breakfast, Yor couldn't keep his eyes off Geneva. He tried engaging in conversation with Kofo, but every attempt at distraction only heightened his frustration. His gaze lingered on her, craving more than words could say. The others noticed, especially Kofo, who took every opportunity to comment on Yor's distraction, his knowing looks, the subtle smirks. As Kofo and his friend prepared to leave, Yor stood to walk them to the door. Kofo looked at him, eyes twinkling with mischief. "I'm happy for you, brother," he said, voice steady but with a hint of teasing. But his face was void of the humor he'd shown during breakfast. Yor nodded, grateful but guarded. "Thanks, bro, she's really something special." Kofo couldn't resist one last dig. Turning at the door he grinned and said, "Moving forward I'll knock. Never know what I might be interrupting." Geneva looked down shyly, her face burning. Yor shot daggers at Kofo, but the man only laughed at his own cleverness. Blake hadn't slept in 2 days. Not really. He spent the hours teetering between rage and fear, pacing the townhouse like a caged animal, then collapsing into a chair only to jolt back up when his mind replayed Geneva's voice, "I want a divorce," and Yor's calm face in front of those bamboo and glass doors. By the third night, when the shadows in his living room started to look like accusations, he called Eleanor Harrell. He needed an ally. Someone to tell him Geneva would come to her senses. The moment she answered, Blake launched into the story like speed could make it make sense. The bistro, the humiliating visit to Global Fiber Solutions, the scene at the restaurant, the divorce papers, the way the city had begun to feel like it belonged to Yao Antwi instead of the Bradshaws. When he finished, silence was the only thing coming from the other end of the line. Blake tightened his grip on the phone, convinced she was trying to process what he'd revealed, trying to decide the right words, the motherly script, the lecture that would put Geneva back in her place. He waited, jaw clenched, breath shallow. "Good for her," Eleanor finally said. "What?" Blake said, completely stunned. "Good for her," Eleanor repeated, and this time there was force behind every syllable. "Blake, I never liked you. You're a spoiled, useless brat who attached yourself to amazing people, like my daughter, and sucked the life out of them, because you're ill-equipped to be anything but a barnacle." Her voice didn't rise, it sharpened, elegant as a blade. "I watched you systematically try to destroy every good thing in my daughter's life, including her. You are a little man, Blake, and you do not deserve my daughter. She looks better with you gone out of her life, so like I said, good for her. Goodbye, Blake. Don't ever dial my number again." The line went dead. Blake stayed there, phone pressed to his ear, listening to nothing like it might turn into mercy. When he finally lowered his hand, his fingers were numb. Eleanor's words kept striking the same place inside him, over and over, and for the first time since Geneva left, his rage didn't feel powerful, it felt exposed. He stared at the dark screen, trying, and failing, to repel the sting. Geneva could hardly contain her joy. Blake had signed the divorce papers and demanded nothing. No settlement, no public fight, no last grasp at control. Some days she still woke up waiting for the other shoe to drop, only to remember that there was no shoe, there was just freedom, real, quiet freedom. and she couldn't believe she was finally hers again. Her business had grown so quickly she'd had to hire an assistant and 2 marketing agents just to keep up. Most of her customers were foreign companies opening branches in the US, hungry for introductions, strategy, and the kind of brand polish that made Americans listen. After the success of the global fiber launch, her phone hadn't stopped ringing, and for the first time in her life, Geneva enjoyed being needed. She enjoyed being respected. She enjoyed earning every win with her own hands. She and Yor had decided to take it slow. Well, he decided they should take it slow. He said he wanted her to get comfortable with her new normal, to learn peace, without waiting for pain to follow it. He was still overprotective of her, and it was both frustrating and strangely sweet. He wouldn't let her go anywhere without him, Kofo, or one of his men. Whenever she mentioned getting her own place, he came up with so many excuses as to why it couldn't happen yet that it became funny. The truth was, Geneva didn't want to leave any more than he wanted her to. Not when safety looked like his hands, his calm, his home. Her mother loved him. Eleanor and Yor spoke every Sunday like clockwork, sometimes about Geneva, sometimes about books, sometimes about nothing at all. Last month, Yor's mother and sister visited, and the trip ended with his mother making Geneva promise she was coming to Ghana for Christmas, with or without Yor. Yor just shook his head and accused her of turning his people against him, but Geneva saw the pride in his eyes when he looked at the women who loved him. Being loved by and loving a man like Yor was surreal. The gifts were beautiful, but it was the encouragement that undid her, the steady support, the way he listened, the way he believed in her even when she still caught herself flinching at good things. And the passion. God, the passion. Just thinking about being in his arms sent a small electrical current through her skin, the kind that reminded her she was alive and safe and desired. Geneva smiled to herself, joy blooming warm in her chest. She loved that man, fully, finally, without fear. Geneva had finally settled into her new office on the 19th floor of Yor's high-rise. The view was breathtaking, and the space was a reflection of her ambition, sleek, modern, and full of promise. Moving her growing business out of their home had been bittersweet. The words "their home" still tasted like honey, sweet and comforting, but she knew it was time to expand. She suggested leasing the space she and Leah had looked at in Peachtree City, but Yor wasn't having it. His protective side showed, firm and unwavering. The very next day, Mrs. Patterson appeared at the penthouse, her posture poised, efficient, no nonsense. She announced that Geneva would be accompanying her to her new office suite, a directive that left Geneva confused. What? Accompany where? Geneva asked, glancing between Mrs. Patterson and her assistant. Mrs. Patterson's face showed a flicker of exhaustion, a silent sign of her daily weariness. Your suite on the 19th floor of the Global Fiber Solutions building. The renovation was completed last week. Mr. Antwi asked that I accompany you to ensure you have everything needed for operations, she explained flatly, as if Geneva's understanding was an afterthought. Just then Leah, ever the reserved professional, brushed past Geneva with a determined look. Well, let's go, she said briskly, leading the way. In the lobby, Geneva spotted the kiosk with the suite number, Fusion Global Strategies, 1900. Did she have the whole floor? No, that wouldn't be right. Yor wouldn't do that. Or would he? Her heart fluttered at the thought of his generosity. She quickly corrected herself with a smile. Yes, he would. The elevator ride was quiet but charged with anticipation. When the doors opened, Geneva was met with a large armed man, his presence commanding yet respectful. Ms. Harrell, Mrs. Patterson, Miss Harris. He greeted with a nod, his voice steady. Good morning, Geneva replied, glancing at his badge. Mr. De Locha? He acknowledged them with a simple nod. The doors to the suite slid open, revealing an interior that was breathtaking. Bamboo, leather, glass intertwined with her favorite color, green. Art adorned the walls. Pieces that she'd only admired at gallery visits, priced at hundreds of thousands, now part of her office. Her heart pounded. This was everything she'd only mentioned once, in passing. Art, colors, furniture. And he had listened, remembered, acted. The realization of his intentionality hit her like a tidal wave. He saw her, understood her. Just then, she turned and saw him. Yor, God, that man was beautiful, strong, regal and undeniably hers. Without thinking, she ran into his arms. He caught her instinctively, holding her close. She kissed him out of gratitude and celebration at first. Then the kiss deepened, passion igniting between them. They forgot everything. Mrs. Guzul, Patterson, Leah, the world outside, lost in their own universe. Mrs. Patterson cleared her throat. Once, twice, until Yor finally registered it. He gently pulled away, a hint of irritation flickering in his eyes, mixed with desire. Geneva's head rested on his chest, and he could feel the weight of her whole body, her eyes still shimmering with emotion. Yor thanked Mrs. Patterson for her assistance, sheepishly despite himself. Leah, meanwhile, was on the phone in the back, animatedly telling Maya and Bailey about their new office, her voice in a pitch so high it seemed humanly impossible. Geneva looked up at him, her heart swelling. "I love you," she whispered. Yor smiled, a promise in his eyes. "I love you too." With that, he left. Geneva was in the kitchen, preparing jollof rice the way his mother taught her, and grilled chicken. Heather Headley's "He Is" played on the radio, and Geneva swayed her hips, taking ownership of the song. Yor stood in the doorway, hypnotized by the whole scene. She had such an amazing voice, clear, crisp, and intoxicating. Geneva turned, looking deep into his eyes, singing and dancing toward him. The sole defender of anything I fear, the baby conceiver, the make me believe, the joy bringer, the love giver. By the time she reached him, Yor was undone. He lifted her up and carried her to their bedroom, food left to fend for itself. The kisses were slow and deliberate at first, as if they were trying to practice restraint, but soon they gave way to their passion. Yor explored every inch of Geneva's body, worshipping her, loving her, and she returned the favor. They stayed entangled in each other's arms, worshipping the other's body, until early morning, when they drifted off into a passion-induced sleep. The next morning, Yor and Geneva were getting dressed for work, music playing, coffee brewing, and happiness. Sheer happiness filling the house. "I have a meeting with a new client in downtown Decatur today, Australians," Geneva said. "That's good," he replied. "Yeah, and while I'm there, I'll pick you up a dozen Beaufort from that bakery you like," she continued. "Who is going with you?" he asked. "Just me." "This is the initial meeting. Nothing out of the ordinary," she said. Yor's protective instinct kicked in. "You know I don't like you meeting new people alone. Take one of my men with you." "My love," Geneva said, adopting his pet name. "I'll be fine. I'll call you every 30 minutes, she teased. Yor turned to her. "Medar, we can't be too careful. Blake and his family are on the verge of losing a lot. The business, money, and their reputation, now that they're under investigation for fraud." Once Blake signed the divorce papers, Yor reported what his men uncovered. Blake and Catherine are being systematically dismantled and revealed for the criminals they are, which makes Blake dangerous, a man with nothing to lose, he thought. Yor had no idea just how true that was. Blake sat at his parents' kitchen island, totally detached from the conversation between his mother and their lawyer. His mind was on Geneva, and the bastard. He had been following her for the past several months. He knew her business was taking off. The new office space, the additional staff, the way she and that bastard gallivanted around Atlanta, making a fool of him. He wouldn't, let them get away with it. He would make them pay. He knew that Yor, not Geneva, reported his and his mother's activities, triggering these investigations. Geneva was clueless. She wouldn't even know where to look. Besides, she still loved him. He just had to get her away from Yor so he could convince her, remind her. And if she still refused, then he would have to show her what he was capable of. No, Blake reaffirmed. This was Yor. He was trying to take everything from him and his family. Yor dangled the carrot in front of him and his mother to get Blake to sign the divorce papers, and still reported them, Blake thought. Now he thinks he is going to live happily ever after with Geneva. No, Blake would make both of them regret what they had done. "If you take this deal, it means no jail time," the lawyer was summarizing. Blake hadn't heard anything except no jail time. The truth was, he didn't care one way or another. He had lost everything of importance anyway. He didn't have anything else to lose. His only solace was his plan for revenge. Geneva felt him before she recognized him. He was about 40 pounds lighter, gaunt, hair disheveled, despite the appearance of someone attempting to tame it. His clothes' only purpose was coverage, not the statement of prestige they had once made. His stance was tight, rigid, and predatory. His eyes were sunken, cold, dangerous, and the voice in her head screamed, "Blake." The full realization of who was standing just a couple of feet from her sent an icicle through her veins. Her throat constricted, her mouth went dry. Sensing the change, Yor spoke. "Medar, what is it? What's wrong?" "Blake," she said through the earbud. The name sent Yor into full combat mode. He spoke softly, but with the urgency of a man understanding the full totality of the threat. "Where are you?" "Bakery back parking lot," she answered, words broken, as if she was speaking a language for the first time. "I am on my way," Yor declared, making the distance from his desk to the door in 3 strides. Yor swung the massive door open, with such force, Mrs. Patterson feared he had pulled it off the hinges. Kofo turned, stopping in his tracks. "What is it?" he asked, already moving in step with Yor. "Geneva. He got Geneva," Yor said, fighting desperately not to let fear take control. "That bastard got Geneva," he repeated. "Where?" Kofo asked as he took out his phone, speaking to someone in Twi. "Geneva, I just want to talk," Blake said as he closed the space between them. She instinctively stepped back. He froze. "There is no need for you to act like this. I am your husband after all." Geneva corrected. That piece of information infuriated Blake. "Geneva, you know you don't walk out on me," he said, close enough that she could smell the stale liquor and the foulness of him. His words sent her mind and body into overtime with fear and panic. "Blake, I'm not sure what you want, but I have to go." "I have an important meeting that I can't be late for," she said, trying to make herself small. "The meeting can wait. We have unfinished business to settle, Mrs. Bradshaw." The familiarity of that name, and the pain associated with it, sparked a hint of defiance. "Harold," she retorted. Blake let the full display of his rage show across his face. He grabbed her chin and moved inches from her face. "You are whoever I say you are, my sweet wife." The last statement felt like acid poured on Geneva's skin. She tried to pull away, but even in his deteriorated state he was still too strong. "Let me go, Blake," she pleaded. "Why, darling? You know I don't let go of what is rightfully mine." There was a flint of sarcasm in his voice. "Where's your knight in shining armor now? Is he not coming to save the day?" Blake spat. "Blake, you don't want to do this. Yor will find me and he will hurt you, if not kill you. He loves me and I love him. He will give his life protecting me," she said, using the words to comfort herself more than to scare him. A dry, putrid laugh came from somewhere deep inside him. "Well, we just have to see about that," he said after a short pause. "You know, the giving his life part." He jerked her arm. Geneva's breath hitched as she realized the shining object she'd spotted earlier was a knife. "Where are we going?" she asked, desperation stripping her voice bare. "Home, darling. We are going home," Blake said in that cold, matter-of-fact tone he used just before he exacted his cruelty. He snatched her purse, retrieved her phone and threw it across the parking lot. Then he dragged her to his car, shoved her in and drove off. Yor's blood ran cold. He had heard the whole conversation via her earbud. He spoke something in Twi to Kofo, then redirected them toward Blake's home, with one thought only: kill Blake. Kofo was on the phone, switching between Twi and English, redirecting his men to the new location, and trying to ensure a level head prevailed. The car stopped a few feet from Blake's home. Yor's door was already open, and he was halfway out, when Kofo, anticipating, gripped Yor by the arm with both hands and yelled, "Wait!" with a hushed tone. Yor turned on Kofo with such venom that Kofo almost let his grip loose. "If you go running in there," Kofo said hurriedly, fearing he wouldn't be able to hold Yor much longer, needing the voice of reason to penetrate, "you can put her in more danger. Our guys are only 2 minutes away. We need to be tactical, not reactive." He finished, holding his breath, waiting to see if the message landed. Some of the tension drained from Yor's body. Kofo was right. "If he hurt her," Yor's voice was raw with rage and fear. "I know," Kofo acknowledged. A black SUV pulled up. 4 very well-armed men got out. Kofo and Yor laid the plan out quickly, and waited for everybody to get in position. Then Yor called Blake. He answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting for the call. "Where is she?" Yor's voice was low and dangerous. "Hi, Mr. Antwi," Blake said, voice light and mocking. "Who are you referring to? My wife? She is in the bedroom waiting for me." "What business do you have with my wife?" Blake asked, amused at his own game. Geneva screamed Yor's name, then a slap and a shriek. "Shut up! I'm talking with Mr. Antwi," Blake snapped. Yor's chest tightened. "Blake," Yor said deliberately, "if you lay another hand on her you will die." He let the words sit, then added, "Let her go." Blake laughed and hung up. 3 seconds later, the door burst open. Yor stood in the doorway, his frame overtaking the room. He and Kofo made the trip to the bedroom in record time. Blake was standing over a cowering Geneva with a knife in his hand. Yor grabbed him by the scruff of his neck, turned him around in one motion and punched him in the face, again and again. Each blow was filled with all the fear and rage Yor had carried, since the first time he realized this he-goat was abusing her. Kofo rushed to Geneva, careful to position himself between her and the violence unfolding in the corner of the bedroom. He got her out of the room, handing her off to one of his men, then returned to find Blake unconscious, and Yor still delivering exacting blows to the broken heap on the floor. "Yeah!" Kofo yelled as he wrestled him away from Blake. "You are no good to Geneva in jail. He is not worth it." The sound of Geneva's name neutralized Yor's rage. He stood there, chest heaving, blood spatter on him, his hands raw from delivering repeated blows to Blake's face. Yor walked out of the room searching for Geneva. When he saw her, she ran to him. "I'm sorry, I should have listened to you," she said. "No, Meda, I'm sorry," he interrupted. "I should have been with you. It will never happen again. I'm never letting you out of my sight." He sealed the promise with his words and his lips, kissing her with everything that was in him. And she received it all. Blake was taken to the hospital, and later booked for kidnapping and other crimes. His plea deal on the fraud charge was dismissed. He received 3 years in prison for fraud, and 6 months later he received 15 years for kidnapping. During the kidnapping trial, Geneva noted that he looked small, extremely small. She wondered why she hadn't noticed that earlier, but quickly decided she had already allowed Blake too much space and time in her life, and it was time to finally and completely turn the page. After his sentencing, Geneva felt a mixture of pity and relief. She looked at the remnants of the Bradshaw family and saw the trappings of money, greed, and a total lack of accountability. Catherine had been sentenced earlier that month to 5 years of supervised probation, and ordered to pay restitution of $150,000. Gregory divorced Catherine, and fully embraced his life with his new wife and kids. Caitlin attended every trial, looking stone-faced and staring straight ahead. After Blake's sentencing, she simply looked at Geneva, gave a faint smile, and walked out. Geneva and Yor walked out of the courtroom, his arm wrapped protectively and lovingly around her. She let her body be carried by him, and they went home to all the possibilities waiting for them. The wedding unfolded in an atmosphere of timeless romance, bathed in soft warm lighting that cast a gentle glow over the elegant decor. The ceremony took place amidst flowing cream-colored drapes, softly illuminated by fairy lights and delicate chandeliers, creating an intimate, enchanting setting. The aisle was lined with lush greenery and white flowers, orchids, hydrangeas and lilies, arranged in cascading bouquets that added a sense of natural beauty and serenity. Eucalyptus and ferns wove through the floral arrangements, bringing in fresh greenery that complemented the romantic ambiance. At the altar, a floral arch adorned with cream and green blossoms served as a stunning focal point, symbolizing love and growth. The reception tables were dressed in luxurious cream satin linens, accented with gold chargers and crystal glassware. Centerpieces featured lush greenery, intertwined with white blooms and flickering candles, casting a warm, romantic glow over the gathering. Gold accents and subtle champagne hues added a touch of sophistication, while greenery garlands and candlelit lanterns created a cozy, intimate environment. Elegant signage and place cards, crafted from fine materials with hints of greenery and floral motifs, tied the decor together seamlessly. Yor and the rest of the wedding party were waiting in their respective places when the lights dimmed and the soft spotlight found its target at the back of the room. Yor watched Geneva being escorted down the aisle by her uncles, one on each side of her, and his knees buckled slightly. Kofo took a step behind him, placed a steady hand on his back, and whispered, "You good, brother?" with a hint of amusement in his voice. Yor nodded, unsure if he could talk, eyes fixed on the beautiful woman walking toward him. Her wedding gown was a luxurious champagne-colored design that beautifully accentuated Geneva's full curves with a figure-hugging silhouette. It featured intricate lace and beaded details on the bodice, a flattering neckline, and a flowing skirt in a soft mermaid shape. Made from rich, smooth silk, it carried elegant touches like a 4-foot train and a lace back. Paired with a simple lace-edged veil, the gown was timeless, graceful, stunning. Realizing she was his, fully his, overwhelmed him, and he felt the tears sitting, waiting, then falling. He decided to let everything be on display, his joy, his gratefulness, his love for this woman. Kofo handed him a handkerchief. Yor took it and wiped his face, never taking his eyes off her for a second. "God, she is a beautiful woman," he thought. When Geneva saw Yor standing there in a deep green suit, paired with a champagne shirt and a subtle gold tie, her body did the acrobatics it always did. It took all that was in her to keep from running into his arms. When she saw him wipe tears from his face, she had to fight back her own. Besides, she put too much effort and time into her makeup for tears. Her girlfriend from college, one of the many people she reconnected with after Blake, saw Geneva fighting for control and discreetly handed her uncle a small battered-operated handheld fan, smiling at Geneva in a knowing, loving way. The ceremony was sweet and simple, with each of them vowing to love and cherish the other for the rest of their life. The kiss was long and passionate, causing the guests to break out in a wave of laughter, applause, and admiration. During the reception, Geneva and Yor noticed Kofo and Leah spending a lot of time together, an observation Geneva planned to explore later. Yor looked down at Geneva, placed a kiss on her forehead, and declared his love for her again. She smiled, reaffirmed her love for him, and thought, "This is a beautiful man. And yes, tonight and the rest of her life, he is her objective."